Welcome back to Mr. Cursed. Something wakes up in the Appalachian Mountains every October. Today, 7 people share their true hiking stories. Encounters so scary, some never went back to the woods again. Please subscribe, like, and share. Tell me where you're from. Thank you all. Let's start. I'm 32 years old, and I manage my family's restaurant down in Asheville. Been doing that for about 3 years now, ever since my dad's back gave out and he couldn't handle the long shifts anymore. My wife, Lisa, she's 29, works as a dental hygienist at this little practice on the other side of town. We'd been married exactly 1 year when this happened, back in October 2024, and honestly, things were pretty tight money-wise. The restaurant was struggling. You know how it is with small businesses these days, and Lisa was picking up extra shifts just so we could keep our heads above water. But we figured our first anniversary deserved something special, even if we had to borrow camping gear from my brother-in-law to make it happen. Lisa found this 3-day backpacking loop through the Blue Ridge Mountains, about 2 hours north of where we live. October's cheaper than summer for pretty much everything, and the restaurant's always slower in the fall anyway, so I could actually take a few days off without feeling like I was abandoning ship. We'd been talking about this trip for months, scraping together enough money for gas and food, treating it like this big investment in our marriage. Looking back, I think we both knew that if we couldn't reconnect during those 3 days, the financial stress might just finish us off completely. The first day was absolutely perfect. I'm not exaggerating. It was like something out of a movie. We hiked hand in hand when the trail was wide enough, shared trail mix, and took stupid selfies by every stream we crossed. It reminded me why I fell in love with her in the first place. Lisa has this laugh that just makes everything else disappear, you know? We spent the whole day talking about buying a house someday, maybe having kids, growing old together on the front porch. All those dreams that feel impossible when you're stressing about rent and wondering if the restaurant's going to make it another month. That first evening, we made dinner by headlamp and just sat there looking at the stars. Lisa fell asleep in my arms, and honestly, I don't think I'd ever been happier. Everything felt right. Everything felt like it was going to work out. The next morning, though, something was off. Lisa woke up absolutely ravenous. I'm talking about eating both our breakfast portions. The oatmeal, the energy bars, even the beef jerky I was saving for lunch. She kept apologizing, saying she couldn't help it, that she was just so hungry she couldn't think straight. Now, Lisa usually eats like a bird, always has, ever since I've known her. But that morning, she was practically shoving food in her mouth. And when I asked if she was feeling okay, she snapped at me. Really snapped, in a way she'd never done before. Then immediately started crying and apologizing, saying she didn't know why she'd said that. I tried not to think too much about it, but I noticed her fingernails looked longer. Lisa always keeps them super short for work. You can't be a dental hygienist with long nails. But these looked like she'd been growing them out for weeks. When I mentioned it, she just stared at her hands like she'd never seen them before. The weather was weird too. It was maybe 50 degrees, typical October mountain weather. But Lisa was burning up. She stripped down to just a tank top and was still sweating, complaining that she felt like she was on fire from the inside. Her hiking boots were bothering her too. Said they felt too tight, like her feet were swollen. She had to loosen the laces completely just to keep walking. That night, I was looking through the photos we'd taken the day before, and I swear Lisa's teeth looked different in every single shot. More pointed, somehow. Sharper. And during the night, she was tossing around so violently I couldn't sleep. The sound of her grinding her teeth was so loud it echoed off the mountains. I could see the muscles in her jaw bulging under the skin. But the morning of day 3, that's when I knew something was really, really wrong. I woke up and Lisa wasn't in the tent. Found her about 20 feet away, crouched over this dead squirrel, just tearing into it with her teeth. Raw. Blood all over her mouth and hands. When she saw me staring, she looked confused, like she didn't know how she'd gotten there or what she was doing. Said she didn't remember catching it, didn't remember leaving the tent. We tried to rationalize it. Altitude sickness, maybe. Stress from work. Lisa thought it might be her period messing with her hormones. We were grasping at straws, honestly, because neither of us wanted to admit that something fundamental was happening to her. By the afternoon, Lisa was clearly taller. Not a little taller. I'm talking 4 inches. maybe more. Her wedding ring was cutting into her finger so bad it was turning purple, but it wouldn't come off no matter how hard we tried. Her face was changing too. The bone structure was different. Her jaw was extending, her brow ridge was more prominent. She was still beautiful, still my wife, but something was just wrong about the proportions. She stopped talking as much, started communicating in grunts and single words, getting frustrated when I couldn't understand what she was trying to tell me. She'd walk ahead on the trail instead of beside me, and every so often she'd stop and sniff the air like an animal catching a scent. That's when she caught the rabbit. I was maybe 10 feet behind her when she just lunged into the bushes and came back up with this rabbit in her hands, killed it barehanded, and started eating it right there, raw, offering me bloody pieces like it was the most natural thing in the world. Like she was sharing a meal with someone she loved. I still loved her. That's the thing I can't get over. Even watching her transform into something else, some part of me was still trying to hold on to my wife, trying to comfort her, trying to save our marriage. But Lisa was disappearing a little more every hour. The full moon was coming. I could feel it, somehow. And Lisa's changes were getting faster. She was clawing trees now, marking territory around our campsite like she was protecting me from other things in the woods. Things I couldn't see, but somehow knew were out there. By the final night, Lisa was over 7 feet tall, covered in coarse gray fur. Her hands had turned into massive claws, and when I said her name, there was no recognition in her eyes. Our wedding vows felt meaningless. She was still bringing me food, dead animals she'd caught, but it was like how you'd feed a pet, not how you'd care for a husband. That's when the others showed up. Other people like Lisa, or what Lisa had become. They came out of the forest in the middle of the night, moving on all fours, communicating in howls and growls. It was some kind of mating season, October breeding cycle. Lisa responded to their calls, and I realized she was choosing them over me, choosing this new life over our marriage. She still protected me from the more aggressive ones, but I wasn't her equal anymore. I was something to be cared for, like a dog or a child. I tried everything, sang our wedding song, showed her photos from our phone, anything to reach whatever was left of the woman I'd married. But Lisa was gone. The creature wearing her face remembered loving me, but it didn't know how to be human anymore. While she slept with the pack, I slipped the wedding ring off her clawed hand. It's the only thing I took with me. I whispered, "I love you," to the thing that had been my wife. But there was no response. Nothing behind those eyes that I recognized. I could have tried to kill her. Maybe I should have. End her suffering, or whatever you want to call it. But I couldn't murder the woman I loved, even if she wasn't really her anymore. So I left. Hiked out alone while they were hunting, never looked back. Reported Lisa missing when I got to town, told everyone she'd fallen into a ravine and I couldn't find her body. We had a funeral with an empty casket. I still wear my wedding ring on a chain around my neck. Tell people my wife died in a hiking accident. Most days, that feels true enough. The Lisa I married is dead. What's living out there in those mountains, raising whatever hybrid children she's had by now, that's not my wife. I never went back to those mountains. Never will. And every October, when the moon gets full, I lock my doors and try not to think about what's howling out there in the dark. To this day, I still love her. That's the part that hurts the most. Somewhere in that forest, there's a creature that remembers being married to me, and I still miss her every single day. I'm 22 years old. My name's Ashley Chen, and I work as a barista at a Starbucks in Charlotte. October 2016 is when this happened, right after I found out my boyfriend of 2 years had been cheating on me the entire time. I needed to get away from everyone, and I couldn't afford therapy, so I decided to do what I'd always done when life got overwhelming. I went hiking. Alone. Deep Creek Trail in the Great Smoky Mountains seemed like the perfect place to just exist for a day without having to explain myself to anyone or pretend I was okay when I definitely wasn't. The thing is, I didn't tell anyone exactly where I was going except my roommate, and even then I was vague about it. My friends had all taken his side, apparently. I was the crazy one for being upset, and my family kept telling me to just get over it and move on. So yeah, I was truly alone in every sense of the word. Deep Creek is an 8-mile loop, challenging enough to keep my mind occupied but doable for someone who hiked regularly. I packed basic day hike stuff, a couple water bottles, some trail mix, my phone for emergencies. The plan was simple. Leave at dawn, have the whole day to myself, be back before dark. The morning started out perfect, honestly. It was late October, so the fall colors were incredible, those deep reds and burnt oranges that make the Smokies look like they're on fire. The air was crisp, cool enough that I needed a light jacket, but not cold. I started crying about a mile in, which was exactly what I needed. Just let it all out while walking, no one around to see me fall apart. By mile 3, I was actually starting to feel a little better. Like maybe I could survive this heartbreak, maybe I'd be okay. That's when I heard his voice. Ashley. I stopped dead on the trail. It was Matt's voice, exact same tone, exact same way he said my name. But that was impossible. He didn't know where I was. He didn't even like hiking, that was always my thing. I stood there for a solid minute, heart pounding, telling myself I was imagining things. Grief does weird stuff to your brain, right? I probably just heard a bird or another hiker, and my messed up mind turned it into his voice. Ashley, where are you? This time it came from deeper in the forest, off the trail to my right. I called back without thinking. Matt, how did you? Ashley. Now the voice was behind me. Same voice, same inflection, but coming from a completely different direction. I spun around, scanning the trees. The trail was empty, no other hikers in sight. The forest had gone weirdly quiet too. I realized I couldn't hear any birds anymore, which was strange because there'd been tons of them earlier. My hands were shaking. I knew, logically, that Matt couldn't be there. But the voice was perfect, not similar, not close, perfect. Ash, baby, come on. The pet name hit me like a punch. That's what he always called me. The voice was using his exact cadence, the little laugh he always did at the end. I felt anger and hurt flooding back, mixing with confusion. Part of me wanted to scream at him, part of me wanted to run. But mostly I was just frozen, trying to understand how this was possible. Then I heard my mother. Ashley? Sweetie, are you okay? Her voice came from somewhere off to my left. Same perfect replication, her slight accent, the worried tone she always used when she called to check on me. But my mom was in Charlotte, at work. She definitely wasn't in the mountains. Ashley Bug, my sister, her childhood nickname for me, coming from behind a cluster of pine trees ahead. Ash, we need to talk. My best friend Jenna, the one who'd stopped returning my calls after the breakup. I started backing up on the trail, my breath coming too fast. All these voices, all these people I knew, calling from different spots in the forest. And they all sounded exactly right. Not like someone doing an impression, not like a recording. Like the actual people were standing just out of sight, talking to me. You look so pretty today, Ashley. That was Matt's mom. She used to say that every time she saw me. Did you finish that term paper? My college roommate from 3 years ago. I miss you so much. Matt again, but this time his voice cracked like he was crying. The voices kept coming. Everyone I'd ever known. Friends from high school. My old manager from my first job. Cousins I hadn't seen in years. Each one perfect. Each one knowing personal things, inside jokes, intimate details that only that specific person would know. The voices were coming from everywhere now, overlapping, creating this horrible chorus of familiarity. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. No signal, which wasn't surprising this deep in the mountains. But I needed to hear something real, something I could trust. I pulled up a voice memo I'd recorded of my sister last month and played it. Her voice came through the speaker, "Hey, just checking in," and immediately I heard it echoed from the forest, but continuing past where the recording stopped. "Hey, just checking in on my favorite sister. Are you okay out there? You shouldn't be alone." I dropped the phone. The voice from the trees was having a full conversation now, using my sister's voice to say things she'd never said, wouldn't say, couldn't know to say. That's when I understood. Something was learning from me. Every time I responded, every time I reacted, it was collecting more information. Building a library of voices, studying how to use them, figuring out what would make me respond. I started running. The voices followed me, calling from the trees on both sides of the trail. They were talking to each other now, recreating conversations I'd actually had. My mom asking Matt how school was going, an exact exchange from Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Jenna and I laughing about something that happened at work. Word for word what we'd said last month. It was like listening to recordings of my entire life, except they were coming from the empty forest around me. "Ashley, stop running. You're going to hurt yourself. Just come here, we'll explain everything. We're worried about you. This isn't like you." Dozens of voices, dozens of people I knew, all calling out with perfect concern, perfect inflection, perfect emotional manipulation. Because that's what it was, I realized, whatever this thing was, it was using my own relationships as weapons. Using my need for connection, my loneliness, the fact that I'd come out here specifically because I felt abandoned by everyone I cared about. I kept running, even as my legs burned and my lungs screamed. The voices didn't stop. They got more intense, more specific. Matt apologizing in that exact tone he used when he wanted something. My mom using her disappointed voice. My dad doing his stern lecture voice. My sister crying. And then they started overlapping, impossible. All these people I knew, talking simultaneously from different directions. My high school English teacher, my dentist, my childhood babysitter, the guy I dated for 3 months in college, voices I hadn't heard in years. Voices I'd almost forgotten. This thing had somehow pulled them all from my memory, perfect reproductions of people who couldn't possibly be there. I stumbled off the trail, pushing through undergrowth, just trying to get away from the voices. But they followed. Always just out of sight, always exactly the right distance to sound real but remain hidden. I could hear footsteps now too, crunching through leaves, but in rhythm that was wrong, too many feet, too coordinated, like one thing controlling multiple bodies. "Please, Ashley. We just want to help. Come back. Don't leave us. We love you." Every voice I'd ever trusted, every person I'd ever cared about, all calling from the October woods, trying to pull me deeper into the trees. I found myself in a small clearing and stopped, gasping for breath. The voices circled around me, coming from every direction, and then they went silent. Completely, utterly silent. The absence of sound was somehow worse than the voices. No birds, no wind, no rustling leaves. Just my own panicked breathing and the pounding of my heart in my ears. Then, barely a whisper, I heard my own voice. "Help me." It was me, my exact voice, my cadence, my fear. Coming from somewhere in the trees ahead. "Please, someone help me." I was hearing myself calling for help, and I realized with cold certainty what was happening. This thing wasn't just mimicking the voices of people I knew, it was adding my voice to its collection. Right now, in real time, every word I said, every sound I made, it was recording and learning and preparing to use against the next person who came through these woods alone. I clamped my hands over my mouth, refusing to make another sound. My own voice kept calling from the forest, begging for help, crying, screaming. It was like listening to myself die, over and over, in dozens of different scenarios. This thing had probably been collecting voices for decades. Every lost hiker, every person who wandered too far off trail, every voice was ammunition for the next victim. I started moving again, but this time silently. I kept my hands over my mouth, breathing through my nose, refusing to give it anything else to use. The voices came back, then everyone I knew, calling my name, begging me to respond, to talk to them, to interact. But I stayed silent. It took me 3 hours to find my way back to the trailhead. 3 hours of voices following me, getting more desperate, more angry. Matt's voice cursing me out, my mom's voice crying, my sister's voice screaming, my own voice begging, pleading, threatening. The thing was using everything it had collected, cycling through every possible emotional manipulation. When I finally reached my car, the voices stopped abruptly, like I'd crossed some invisible boundary. I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes, just breathing, listening to the normal sounds of the parking area. A few other hikers loading their gear. Birds chirping, wind through the trees. Normal, safe. I tried to drive home, but I couldn't. Every time someone spoke a voice on the radio, a person at a gas station, even my own voice, when I tried to call my roommate, I felt panic rising. How could I ever trust sound again? How could I know if a voice was real, or if that thing had somehow followed me home, was hiding somewhere, ready to use what it had learned? I pulled over at a rest stop and sat there for hours, just trying to figure out what to do. And I know this sounds extreme, but I couldn't see another option. I took my keys and I damaged my own hearing. Not completely, I'm not deaf. But I made it hard for me to process voices clearly. The frequencies got all messed up. People sound distorted now, robotic almost. I can hear that someone's talking, but I can't make out the subtle inflections anymore. The emotional tones, the personal characteristics that make each voice unique. It was the only way I could function. I learned sign language over the next few months, got connected with the deaf community, who were incredibly supportive and didn't ask too many questions about why a hearing person suddenly needed to communicate without sound. I kept my barista job but transferred to a location that knew about my hearing issues and was willing to work with me. To this day, and it's been 8 years now, I can't listen to voicemails, can't watch videos with people talking, can't have conversations on the phone. I communicate through text, through sign, through writing everything down. My family thinks I had some kind of breakdown after the cheating thing, and maybe I did, but they don't know the real reason. I've tried to warn people about Deep Creek Trail. I've posted online, using written warnings, telling people about an entity that collects voices. Most people think it's just creepypasta or that I'm mentally unstable. But every few years, I see a news story about a hiker who went missing in that area, or someone who came back changed, who stopped talking, who couldn't trust human speech anymore. And I know that thing is still there, still collecting, still building its library of human voices, learning how to manipulate, how to isolate, how to trap people using the sounds of everyone they've ever loved. I still hear voices sometimes, even with my damaged hearing. Late at night, when it's quiet, I'll hear Matt calling my name. My mom asking if I'm okay. My own voice begging for help. But now they sound wrong enough, distorted enough, that I can recognize them for what they are. Echoes of October 2016, reminders of what lives in those mountains, still calling, still collecting, still waiting for the next person who ventures into the woods alone. I don't hike anymore. I stay in cities, surrounded by people and noise and the safe chaos of modern life. Because I know what's waiting in the quiet places. I know what it sounds like when something ancient and patient decides to speak with the voices of everyone you love. And I know that silence, even lonely silence, is better than the alternative. I'm 35 years old, and I've been fixing cars at Tony's Garage in Strasburg, Virginia for about 15 years now. Name's Rick Kowalski. October 2022, I went bow hunting up in George Washington National Forest like I do every year during bow season, and what happened to me up there still makes me check the tree line behind my house at night. I don't talk about this much, but I figure maybe someone needs to hear it. I've been hunting these mountains since I was 16, got my first license the day I could legally apply for one. My dad taught me everything he knew about bow hunting, and by the time I was in my 20s, I was feeding my family venison all winter long. It's not just a hobby for me. With grocery prices what they are, having that meat in the freezer makes a real difference. My wife, Sarah, and our 2 kids depend on me bringing home a successful hunt, and I take that responsibility seriously. I've got quality equipment, a decent compound bow I saved up for years ago, good arrows, proper scent control, everything. I'm not one of those weekend warriors who shows up in the woods unprepared. I prefer hunting alone, always have. You move quieter, you're more patient, and honestly, you don't have to coordinate with anyone else's schedule or skill level. I know my capabilities, and I know these mountains. The section of George Washington National Forest I hunt has been my territory for 2 decades. I know every trail, every creek, every ridge. I know where the deer bed down, where they feed, where they move between water sources. I've walked those woods in every season, but October is when everything comes together. The rut is starting, the deer are active, and the weather is perfect. Cool mornings, crisp air, leaves still on most of the trees, providing good cover. That first day started normal as could be. I got to my spot about an hour before dawn, climbing up into my tree stand in the dark like I've done 100 times before. I had my headlamp on, its dimmest red setting, moving slow and quiet. Got myself settled in about 20 feet up in a big oak tree that overlooks a natural funnel where deer move between 2 ridges. I'd seen good sign there the week before when I was scouting. Fresh scrapes, rubs on the saplings, tracks in the mud near the creek. Everything pointed to this being a solid location. The sun came up gradual through the canopy, turning the forest from black to gray to that golden October light that makes everything look like a painting. I could see my breath in the cold air, had my thermos of coffee, a couple granola bars, my bow within easy reach. I was prepared to sit there all day if I needed to. That's the thing about bow hunting that most people don't understand. It's not about the kill, it's about the patience. You become part of the tree, part of the woods. You wait, you watch, you breathe slow and steady, and you let the forest forget you're there. For the first few hours, everything was perfect. I heard squirrels moving through the leaves below me. A pileated woodpecker hammered away at a dead tree somewhere off to my left. Around 8 in the morning, I saw a doe and her yearling pick their way through the underbrush about 60 yards out. Too far for a good shot, but it was good to see deer moving through the area. The morning stayed quiet and normal right up until about 10:30. That's when I started hearing the wrong kind of sounds. At first, I thought it was other hunters moving through the area, which annoyed me because I was pretty sure I was the only one with permission to hunt this particular section. But the sounds weren't quite right for people. They were too coordinated, too deliberate. Multiple somethings were moving through the forest in a pattern that felt organized, and they were making sounds I couldn't quite place. Not voices exactly, but not animal sounds either, clicks and whistles, almost like someone was using some kind of communication system. I stayed perfectly still in my tree stand, watching and listening. The sounds moved in a wide arc around my position, staying maybe 100 yards out. Whatever was making them wasn't just passing through, they were circling. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. These things, whatever they were, weren't moving randomly. They were showing strategy, planning, coordination. This wasn't animal behavior, this was something else. I've been hunting long enough to know the difference between being the hunter and being the hunted. Your instincts tell you. That primal part of your brain that kept your ancestors alive, it wakes up and starts screaming warnings. I felt that switch flip somewhere around 11 in the morning, sitting in that tree stand. I wasn't hunting anymore. I was being hunted. The creatures, and I'm calling them that because I still don't know what else to call them, they had no scent. None. I had the wind in my favor, and I couldn't smell a damn thing, which is wrong on every level. Deer have scent. Bears have scent. Even coyotes have scent. These things were odorless, like they'd evolved specifically to avoid detection. And they were patient. For the next 2 hours, they kept up their systematic movement around my position, maintaining distance, never showing themselves, just letting me know they were there. The clicks and whistles got more complex as the afternoon wore on. I realized they were communicating with each other, coordinating their movements. I could track at least 4 distinct entities based on the sound patterns, maybe more. They were working together like a military unit, and I was surrounded. My tree stand, which I'd chosen for its tactical advantage over deer, suddenly felt a lot less secure. Around 1 in the afternoon, things escalated. They started throwing rocks. Not random rocks either, deliberate throws designed to gauge my position and test my responses. A rock would sail through the air and crack against a tree 30 yards to my left. I'd turn to look. 5 minutes later, another rock from a different direction. They were studying me, learning my patterns, figure out how I reacted to threats. It was the most unsettling thing I'd ever experienced because it showed problem-solving intelligence. Tool use, strategy. I kept my bow ready, arrow nocked, but what was I going to shoot at? I couldn't see them. They stayed in the thick brush and heavy timber, never breaking cover. But I could hear them moving, repositioning, communicating. The whistles got sharper, more urgent. Whatever they were planning, they were getting ready to execute it. That's when I made the decision to use my bow sight's scope to try and spot them. I'd been avoiding looking directly at their positions because I didn't want to give away that I knew where they were. But I needed information. I needed to know what I was dealing with. I brought my bow up slow, using the magnified sight to scan the tree line where I'd heard the most recent movement. At first I didn't see anything, just autumn forest, brown and gold leaves, gray tree trunks, shadows. Then something moved, and I adjusted the scope to focus on it. What I saw made my blood turn to ice water. The creature was bipedal, standing upright like a human, but it wasn't human. It was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, covered in dark brown fur that was almost black in the shadows. Long arms, longer than human proportions, with powerful shoulders and a barrel chest. The legs looked built for climbing and running, all muscle and sinew. But it was the way it moved that really got to me. Purposeful, intelligent. It was holding something in its hand, and when I focused the scope, I realized it was a crude spear. Just a sharpened stick, but a weapon nonetheless. I swung the scope slowly to the right, and I spotted another one, then another. They were positioned at intervals around my tree stand, watching me. I could see their eyes tracking my movements. Dark eyes, deeply set under heavy brow ridges. They looked almost human, but wrong. Like evolution had taken a different path and created something that filled the same ecological niche as humans, but developed completely separately. The pack had me surrounded. I counted at least 6 of them that I could see, which meant there were probably more I couldn't. They'd positioned themselves at every possible escape route. If I climbed down from the tree stand, they'd be on me before I hit the ground. If I tried to wait them out, well, they'd already demonstrated they were more patient than any animal I'd ever hunted. They could outweight me easy. I saw the pack leader then. Had to be the leader based on how the others kept looking to it for signals. It was bigger than the rest, maybe 7 feet tall, with broader shoulders and scars visible even through its fur. Old scars, white lines across its chest and arms. This thing had been fighting for a long time. It held a longer spear than the others, and it had what looked like a leather strap across its chest with various objects hanging from it. Trophies, I realized. Hunting trophies. I could make out a compass, a knife sheath, what looked like parts of a rifle sling, human hunting gear. That's when I understood what October meant to these creatures. This was their hunting season. The time of year when humans came into their territory with weapons and confidence, thinking they were the apex predators. These things had learned to hunt the hunters. They'd studied human behavior, learned our patterns, figured out our weaknesses, and they'd gotten good at it. 20 years of hunting experience suddenly felt worthless. The pack leader made a sound, a long, warbling whistle that rose and fell in pitch. The other creatures responded with clicks and shorter whistles. They were coordinating their attack. I could see them tensing, getting ready to move. My heart was hammering, so hard I could feel it in my ears. I had maybe seconds to make a decision. I did the only thing I could think of. I stood up in the tree stand, making myself as visible and large as possible, and I yelled, just roared at the top of my lungs, trying to project every ounce of aggression and dominance I could muster. It was a primal response, maybe stupid, but something in me refused to go down without a fight. I was a hunter. I'd been hunting these mountains for 2 decades. I wasn't going to be prey without putting up a fight. The creatures froze. The pack leader tilted its head, studying me with those dark, intelligent eyes. For a long moment, nobody moved. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no squirrels, no wind. Just me, standing in a tree stand with my bow, facing down a pack of evolved predators that had probably killed before. Then, the pack leader did something I didn't expect. It lowered its spear, made a short, sharp clicking sound. The other creatures backed away, melting into the forest like shadows. Within seconds, they'd vanished completely, and I was alone in my tree stand with my heart trying to punch through my ribcage. I stayed in that tree for another hour, shaking, before I finally worked up the courage to climb down. I kept my bow ready the whole time, expecting them to rush me the moment my feet touched the ground. But nothing happened. The forest stayed quiet. When I finally got down and started the long walk back to my truck, I moved faster than I've ever moved through the woods, practically running, constantly checking over my shoulder. My truck was right where I'd left it. GPS worked fine, cell phone worked fine. Everything was normal once I got back to the parking area, like the whole thing had never happened. But I knew better. I checked my gear when I got home, and the wear patterns on my bow and arrows, they weren't right. Like something had examined them while I was distracted. Subtle, but there. I never went back to that section of forest. I still hunt, but I pick different areas now. Places with more human traffic, closer to roads and established trails. I tell people it's because the deer patterns shifted, but that's a lie. The truth is I know what's really up there in those deep woods, and I know that in October, I'm not the apex predator I thought I was. My wife asks me sometimes why I seem jumpy when we're outside at dusk, why I always keep the porch light on at night, why I won't let the kids play in the tree line behind our property. I tell her I'm just being careful. But the real reason is that sometimes, late at night when the wind is right, I hear whistles in the distance, organized patterns, like communication. And I remember standing in that tree stand, surrounded by creatures that had learned to hunt humans. They let me go that day. I think the pack leader recognized that I wasn't going to go down easy, that I'd fight back and maybe injure one of them in the process. Or maybe they'd already had a successful hunt that season and didn't need another human trophy. I don't know. What I do know is that there's a territory in George Washington National Forest that belongs to them, not to us. And every October, when bow season opens and hunters head into those mountains thinking they're at the top of the food chain, I wonder how many of them are going to learn the same lesson I did. I'm 35 years old, and I've been hunting for almost 20 years. I thought I knew everything about these mountains. Turns out I didn't know a damn thing. I'm 29 years old, worked the night shift in the ER at a regional hospital. In October 2018, I hiked a section of the Appalachian Trail through Virginia, trying to fix my completely messed up sleep schedule. My name's Jenny Martinez, and honestly, after 8 months straight of rotating shifts without a single day off, I was running on fumes. The hospital was short-staffed that year, so I'd been pulling doubles and covering for other nurses constantly. My sleep pattern was completely destroyed. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling for hours, then pass out at random times during the day. Nothing worked anymore. No amount of melatonin or meditation or those white noise machines. I needed to reset everything, and my mom suggested I do what her dad used to do when his mind got too cluttered. Go walk in the mountains until your body forces you to sleep right again. I picked a 5-day section hike through Virginia. Moderate difficulty, well-marked trail. I'm comfortable being alone, to be honest. When you work night shifts, you get used to isolation. The hospital at 3 a.m. is a different world, and after a while, that quiet becomes normal, even comforting. So solo hiking didn't bother me. I loaded up my pack with the usual gear: tent, sleeping bag, food, water filter, plus my professional paranoia kit. First aid supplies, emergency medications, the works. I'm a nurse. I can't help it. I see worst-case scenarios in everything. Day 1 went perfect. I hiked 12 miles through beautiful fall colors, got to my campsite around 5 p.m., set everything up professionally. I ate dinner, watching the sun go down through the trees, and I remember thinking this was exactly what I needed. My legs were sore, my body was tired in that good way, and for the first time in months, I actually felt sleepy at a normal hour. I crawled into my tent around 9 p.m., and I was asleep in minutes. Then I woke up to footsteps. It was maybe 2 a.m., and I could hear people walking past my tent. Not running or stomping, just normal walking pace. I heard quiet conversation too, like a couple people talking low while they hiked. My first thought was maybe through hikers doing a night hike, except that's pretty dangerous on this section. The trail gets rocky, and without good moonlight, you're asking for a twisted ankle or worse. But I figured maybe they had headlamps and knew what they were doing. I tried to go back to sleep, but something felt off. The footsteps sounded too regular, too synchronized, like they were walking in formation or something. After a few minutes, I unzipped my tent to check. The moon was pretty full, so I could see okay. And there they were, 3 figures walking single file about 20 feet from my campsite. They were moving at the exact same pace, same stride length, like they were connected by invisible rope. I called out, "Hey, you guys okay?" No response. They just kept walking, didn't even turn their heads. That was my first clue, something was wrong. Hikers always acknowledge each other on the trail, especially at night. It's basic safety protocol. But these 3 just kept going until they disappeared into the trees. I watched for a couple minutes, then went back to sleep, figuring maybe they had earbuds in or something. 2 hours later, it happened again. More footsteps, different people this time. I looked out and saw 4 figures walking past, same synchronized movement, same direction. I called out again. Nothing. They walked right past like I didn't exist. This pattern repeated every 2 hours all night. By 6 a.m., when I finally gave up on sleep, I'd seen maybe 15 different people walking past my campsite in the dark, all moving with that same weird synchronized gait, none of them responding to my voice. And I'm an ER nurse. I'm trained to recognize medical conditions. This looked exactly like sleepwalking behavior. The blank expressions, the automatic movements, the lack of response to external stimuli. But mass sleepwalking doesn't happen. It's medically impossible for 15 people to all sleepwalk through the same area on the same night following the same path. Day 2. I hiked on, exhausted and confused. Around noon, I caught up with a couple in their 40s who'd camped a mile ahead of me. We got to talking, and the woman mentioned something weird. She said she'd woken up that morning 3 miles from her campsite with no memory of how she got there. Her husband found her at dawn walking down the trail in her pajamas. She had no recollection of leaving the tent or hiking. She thought maybe she'd been sleepwalking, but she'd never done that before in her life. That afternoon, I met a solo hiker who told me the same thing. He'd woken up at 4 a.m., missing 4 hours of time, found himself 2 miles from where he'd gone to sleep. Then another hiker at dinner, a guy maybe mid-20s, said he'd lost an entire night, went to sleep at 10 p.m., woke up at sunrise halfway up a ridge he'd never hiked before, completely covered in scratches from walking through brush. I'm good at pattern recognition. It's part of medical training. All these episodes started in October. All happened during the full moon cycle. All involved complete memory loss during the sleepwalking periods. And all got worse the further north you hiked into this particular section of trail. That night, I barely slept. I kept waking up every hour to check I was still in my tent, still in control of my own body. Around 2 a.m., I heard them again. The footsteps. But this time there were more, maybe 20 or 30 people walking past. I looked out and my blood went cold. It wasn't just random hikers anymore. It was everyone I'd met on the trail that day. The couple, the solo hiker, the young guy, all walking in perfect formation, blank faces, heading north towards something I couldn't see. And the terrifying part? I felt the pull too. It started as a pressure in my head, like the feeling you get flying when your ears need to pop. Then it spread down my spine, into my arms and legs. My body wanted to stand up, to unzip the tent, to join them. I recognized it immediately from my sleep medicine rotation in nursing school. It was the same neurological pattern that triggers sleepwalking. But I was awake. I was consciously feeling something trying to override my voluntary motor control. I fought it, dug my nails into my palms, counted backwards from 100, went through drug classifications in my head, anything to keep my conscious mind engaged. After about 10 minutes, the pressure faded, the footsteps moved on. But I knew I'd barely held on. Day 3, I started asking other hikers more direct questions. An older man told me about local stories, said people in the nearby towns called them the October Walkers. He said it'd been happening for as long as anyone could remember. People hike this section in autumn, start sleepwalking, lose time, some never come back. The ones who do come back can't remember where they went, but they're different after. Quieter, like something got taken from them. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I took caffeine pills, drank camp coffee, stayed awake watching. Around midnight, the pressure in my head started again, stronger this time. Way stronger. My legs stood up without me telling them to. My hands started unzipping the tent. I was watching myself move with zero control, and I was fully conscious the whole time. That's when I realized this wasn't sleepwalking. This was something controlling people, using sleep as the access point, but I was awake and it was still getting in. I stumbled outside the tent, and I saw them all around me now. Dozens of people, all the hikers from the trail, walking in concentric circles around a grove of trees maybe 100 yards ahead. Old-growth forest, the kind that predates logging, trees thick as trucks. And I could feel it coming from there. This subsonic hum that wasn't quite sound, more like a vibration in my skull. It was calling everyone, pulling them closer. I used every technique I knew, recited emergency protocols, calculated drug dosages, ran through the steps of CPR, of intubation, of trauma assessment, anything to keep my conscious mind fighting. My body kept trying to walk toward the grove, but I'd make it 3 steps and then force myself to stop. 3 more steps. Stop. It was like my brain was at war with itself. Then I saw what was waiting in the grove. I still don't have words for it, honestly. It wasn't a shape, exactly. More like a space where reality bent wrong. The trees around it grew at impossible angles, and the shadows moved independently from any light source. I could feel it thinking, studying all of us. It was old. So old that human presence here was recent, just a blip. It had been here long before the trail, before the settlers, before the Cherokee. It had been harvesting people's sleep for centuries, feeding on whatever consciousness is made of, learning us from the inside. The October walkers reached the grove and stopped. They just stood there in a circle, swaying slightly, while this thing examined them, and I felt it turn its attention to me. The pressure in my head became a spike. My vision went double. My body lurched forward. I bit down on my tongue hard enough to draw blood. The pain shocked my system, and I felt my control come back for just a second. That's when I ran. I didn't grab my tent or my gear or anything. I just ran back down the trail, and the whole time I could feel this thing trying to yank me back like a fish on a line. My legs wanted to turn around. My body wanted to stop. But I kept running, kept using pain to stay conscious, pinching my arms, slapping my face, biting my lip. I ran for maybe 2 hours straight, and sometime around 4 a.m., the pressure vanished. Just gone. I collapsed on the trail and realized I could see the sunrise. Starting. The thing was weaker in daylight. Maybe it could only maintain full control in darkness. I hiked straight out to the nearest road and hitched a ride to the parking lot where I'd left my car. I never went back for my gear, left a $300 tent and everything else, didn't care. That was October 2018. It's been years now, and I still have insomnia, worse than before. But here's the thing, I'm grateful for it, because I know now that sleep isn't safe. Not always. Something can be waiting in that unconscious space. Something that sees us as food, as entertainment, as experiments. My sleep schedule never fixed itself. I work the night shift still, and I'm tired all the time, but at least when I'm awake, I'm in control. I looked up missing persons reports for that trail section later. There are dozens. Hikers who went out alone in October and never came back. The local rangers call it bad luck, wildlife attacks, people getting lost. But I know what really happened. I know where they went. They're still out there in those woods, walking in circles, feeding that thing whatever it takes from us. Sometimes at work, during the really quiet hours around 3 a.m., I'll see patients come in with that same look, that faraway expression, like part of them is somewhere else. And I'll ask when it started, and they'll say, October. They'll say they were hiking. They'll say they don't remember. I don't tell them what I know. What good would it do? You can't fight something that lives in the space between awake and asleep. You can only stay awake and hope it doesn't come looking for you again. I don't hike anymore, don't even go camping. And October? I work every single night shift in October now. Stay in the bright lights of the hospital, surrounded by people and machines and noise. Because out there in the quiet, in the dark, during that perfect autumn weather when everyone wants to go into the woods, that's when it's hungry. I had just turned 29 and was working maintenance at a paper mill outside Beckley when this whole thing happened. My girlfriend Sarah had dumped me about 3 weeks before, said I spent too much time in the woods and not enough time with actual people. Maybe she was right, but honestly, those mountains were the only place I felt like I could think straight. I'd been hiking the same section of the Appalachian Trail since I was 16. Knew every route, every switchback, every place where the creek crossed under the old logging bridge. It was October, and the leaves were just starting to turn, which meant I had maybe 2 more good weekends before hunting season made it too dangerous to be out there alone. I drove up to the trailhead early Saturday morning, same spot I always parked near Pinnacle Rock. The air was crisp but not cold, probably around 50 degrees, and there wasn't another car in sight. Perfect hiking weather, really. I'd planned to do about 12 miles that day, nothing too ambitious, just enough to clear my head and maybe figure out what I was going to do about finding a new place to live. Sarah and I had been splitting rent on a little house in town, and now I was looking at moving back in with my parents or finding some sketchy apartment I could actually afford on mill wages. The first few miles were exactly what I needed. Quiet, peaceful, just the sound of my boots on the trail, and maybe some birds calling from deeper in the woods. I'd been walking for about an hour when I came to this section, where the trail splits off toward an old fire tower. There's supposed to be a trail marker there. I'd seen it hundreds of times before. But when I got to the split, the marker was different. Instead of the usual wooden post with the white painted blazes, there was this old metal sign, rusted and bent, with text I couldn't quite make out from where I was standing. I walked closer to get a better look, and the sign said, Hollow Creek, Settlement, 2.3 miles. That didn't make sense. I'd been hiking this trail for over 10 years, and there wasn't any settlement called Hollow Creek anywhere around here. I knew every side trail, every old homestead foundation, every abandoned mine shaft in a 15-mile radius. This sign was pointing down a path I'd never seen before, even though I was standing in a spot I'd passed through dozens of times. Looking back now, I should have just kept walking the main trail. Should have figured it was some new historical marker the Park Service had put up, or maybe my mind was playing tricks on me because I was stressed about the breakup and everything. But I was curious, and honestly, I had nowhere else I needed to be that day. So I took the side trail. The path was overgrown but clearly marked, like people had been using it recently, but not often enough to keep the weeds down. It wound down into a hollow I'd never noticed before, which was weird because I thought I knew every fold and valley in these mountains. The trees got thicker as I descended, blocking out more and more sunlight, and the air got cooler and damper. There was this smell too. Not bad exactly, but musty, like old wood and wet leaves that had been sitting too long. After about 20 minutes of walking, the trail leveled out, and I could see buildings ahead through the trees. Actual buildings, not just foundation stones or collapsed cabins like you usually find in these old hollows. There were maybe 6 or 7 structures. A few houses, what looked like a small church, and a building that might have been a general store. They were all in remarkably good shape for being abandoned, which I assumed they had to be since I'd never heard of any active settlement back here. I walked into what would have been the main street, if you could call it that. Just a dirt road, really, with the buildings clustered on either side. The houses were simple frame construction, painted white but faded, and peeling. The church had a small steeple with no bell, and the store had a covered porch with a few old chairs sitting empty. Everything was quiet, no birds, no insects, no wind moving through the trees. The silence was so complete, it felt like walking through a museum after hours. I approached the store first, thinking maybe there would be some kind of historical plaque or information about the settlement. The front door was open, just darkness beyond the threshold. I called out, "Hello?" But my voice seemed to get swallowed up before it could carry very far. No echo, no response, just that thick silence. I stepped up onto the porch, and the boards creaked under my weight. The first normal sound I'd heard since entering the settlement. Through the open door, I could see shelves lining the walls, and what looked like old merchandise still sitting on them. Canned goods, fabric, tools, all covered in dust but organized like someone had just stepped away for a moment. That's when I noticed the smell again, stronger now. Not just musty, but something else underneath it, sweet and sick, like fruit that had gone bad. I took a few steps into the store, and my eyes adjusted to the dim light. The shelves were full of items that looked old-fashioned. Glass jars with handwritten labels, bolts of cloth in patterns I'd never seen, hand tools that belonged in a museum. Behind the counter, there was an old cash register and a ledger book lying open. I walked over and looked at the last entry. In careful handwriting, someone had written, the 15th of October, 1952, final payment received from McLeod family. Settlement accounts closed. The ink looked fresh. I backed away from the counter and headed for the door. Something was very wrong here, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. The settlement looked abandoned, but everything was too well preserved, too organized. It was like everyone had just vanished one day, leaving everything exactly as it was. Outside, I noticed that the other buildings had their doors open too. The church, the houses, even what looked like an old schoolhouse at the far end of the street. All standing open, all dark inside, all completely silent. I should have left then. Should have hiked back up to the main trail and never looked back. But I needed to understand what I was seeing. I walked toward the church, my footsteps unnaturally loud on the dirt road. As I got closer, I could see through the open door to the interior. Wooden pews arranged in neat rows, a simple altar at the front, a few hymnals scattered on the seats like people had just finished a service. But the air inside was so thick, and still it was hard to breathe. I didn't go in. Instead, I turned toward one of the houses, a 2-story place with a front porch and lace curtains in the windows. The door was open like all the others, and I could see a hallway leading back into the house. Family pictures hung on the walls, and there was a coat rack with jackets still hanging on it. "Hello?" I called out again, louder this time. "Is anyone here?" My voice disappeared again, like the air itself was absorbing the sound. I stepped onto the porch and looked through the doorway. The hallway led to what looked like a kitchen, and I could see a table set for dinner. Plates, silverware, glasses, everything ready for a meal that never happened. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming from somewhere inside the house. Not like someone walking around normally, but measured steps, like someone pacing back and forth in the same pattern over and over. I froze on the porch, listening. The footsteps continued, steady and rhythmic, from what sounded like upstairs. Then they stopped. Complete silence again for maybe 30 seconds. Then they started again, same pattern, same rhythm. I should have run. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of there, but I couldn't move. The footsteps stopped, again, and this time I heard something else. A voice, soft and distant, like someone calling from very far away. I couldn't make out words, but it sounded like a woman's voice, almost singing. The singing got clearer, and I realized it was a hymn, something I recognized from when my grandmother used to take me to church as a kid. Amazing Grace, but sung so slowly and quietly it was almost a whisper. The voice seemed to be coming from the church now, not the house. I turned and looked back at the church. Through the open door, I could see a figure sitting in one of the front pews. A woman in a long dress, her back to me, rocking slightly as she sang. How had I missed her before? I was sure the church had been empty when I'd looked in earlier. I walked toward the church, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the singing. As I got closer, the woman's voice got clearer, but there was something wrong with it. The words were right, but her voice sounded hollow, like an echo of an echo. I stopped at the church doorway and called out, "Excuse me? Ma'am?" The singing stopped immediately. The woman in the front pew went completely still, but she didn't turn around. I could see her shoulders and the back of her head, dark hair pinned up in an old-fashioned style. "Ma'am, are you okay?" I tried again. Still no response, but now I could hear other sounds from inside the church, rustling, like fabric moving, and what sounded like whispered voices coming from the other pews. I looked closer and realized there were other figures sitting throughout the church. Men, women, children, all facing the altar, all completely motionless. The woman in the front pew slowly began to turn her head toward me. Not her whole body, just her head, turning farther than any person should be able to turn. I caught a glimpse of her profile, and her skin looked wrong, too pale, almost gray, like old paper. I stumbled backward off the church steps and started walking, quickly toward the edge of the settlement. Behind me, I heard the singing start again, but now it was multiple voices, all singing that same hymn at different speeds and in different keys. The sound was horrible, like a music box that had been broken and was winding down. I reached the tree line and looked back. Every building in the settlement had figures standing in the doorways now, all facing in my direction. Men in work clothes, women in long dresses, children in old-fashioned school clothes. None of them were moving, but they were all watching me. I turned and ran up the trail, crashing through branches and stumbling over roots in my hurry to get back to the main path. Behind me, the singing got louder and more distorted, like dozens of voices all trying to sing the same song, but none of them remembering how it was supposed to go. When I finally reached the junction where I'd seen the metal sign, I stopped and looked back. The sign was gone. In its place was the familiar wooden trail marker I'd seen hundreds of times before, with the standard white blazes pointing toward the fire tower. There was no sign of any side trail. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, trying to catch my breath and make sense of what had just happened. I walked back and forth along the main trail, looking for any trace of the path I'd taken down to the settlement. Nothing, just thick woods and rocky ground that looked like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. I hiked back to my car as fast as I could and drove straight home. That night, I looked up everything I could find about settlements in that area. I found references to several old communities that had been abandoned when the park was established, but nothing called Hollow Creek, no settlement in the location where I'd been, and definitely nothing that had been active as recently as 1952. I've never gone back to that section of trail, changed my whole hiking routine to avoid it completely. I still go to the mountains, but I stick to the popular trails now, the ones with lots of other hikers. Sarah was right about one thing. I do spend too much time in the woods. But now it's because I'm afraid of what I might find if I go too far off the beaten path. To this day, I can't listen to Amazing Grace without feeling sick to my stomach. And sometimes, when I'm hiking alone and the woods get too quiet, I swear I can still hear that broken singing drifting through the trees. Like those voices are still trying to finish their hymn and can't quite remember how it's supposed to end. I never told anyone about this until now. Who would believe it? I barely believe it myself, and I was there. But I know what I saw. And I know those people in that settlement weren't supposed to be there. They weren't supposed to be anywhere. And sometimes I wonder if they're still down there, still waiting in that empty hollow, still singing their broken songs to an empty church. I'm 19 years old, and I work as a cashier at the Kroger here in Beckley, West Virginia. Most people think my life is pretty normal, scanning groceries, living with my mom, saving every penny for community college. But what they don't know is that I have 250,000 followers on TikTok who think they know everything about me. They call me Broke Girl Lemma, and honestly, that username started as a joke. Now, it feels more like a prison sentence. See, about 2 years ago, I started posting these little videos about my life, working 40 hours a week, eating ramen for dinner, dreaming about getting out of this small town. I thought maybe 5 people would watch them. But something about the authentic poor girl grinding content really hit with people. They started calling me inspirational. They said I was keeping it real when everyone else was fake. The followers kept coming, and with them came the pressure to keep being real all the time. By October, I was getting about 1,000 new followers every week, but my views were dropping. The algorithm is brutal. You have to keep getting more extreme to stay relevant. That's when I came up with the idea for my Broke Girl Survives Wilderness series. I plan to do a week of solo hiking videos in the mountains around here, showing how someone like me could have adventures even without money. If I could hit 500,000 followers by Christmas, the sponsorship deals would finally kick in. Real money, college money, a way out. My mom wasn't thrilled about me hiking alone, but the comments were clear. My followers wanted solo content. They were tired of seeing other people in my videos. They wanted just me, just Emma, being real with them. I maxed out my credit card, buying hiking gear, and borrowed my cousin's expensive camera equipment. Everything was riding on this series. I had to make it work. The first day went perfectly. It was mid-October, and the fall colors were incredible. I hiked up to Spruce Knob, getting dome in, shots of me setting up my little tent, cooking over a camp stove, talking about how this was proof you didn't need to be rich to live your dreams. The engagement was through the roof, comments pouring in with hearts and fire emojis. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe I actually would make it. But that night, something started to shift. I was live streaming from my tent, just chatting with people in the comments, when someone wrote, "This is boring. Do something dangerous." At first, I laughed it off, but then more comments started flooding in with the same message. Climb the rocks at night. Go into the caves. This is too safe. I tried to redirect, talking about how beautiful the stars were, but the viewer count kept dropping. By the time I ended the stream, I'd lost 200 followers. The next morning, I woke up with this weird pressure in my chest. I kept checking my phone, refreshing the comments, but nothing felt like enough. I started the day's hike, but my followers were demanding a live stream. Not just a video I could edit later, they wanted real-time content. So I started broadcasting while walking, trying to narrate everything I saw. But every few minutes, someone would comment that it was getting boring, that I needed to do something more exciting. That's when things got really weird. I noticed my Instagram filters, the ones that smooth your skin and make your eyes bigger, were somehow affecting what I saw in real life. When I looked at my reflection in a stream, my face looked like the filtered version. When I tried to turn off the filter and take a normal selfie, my actual face looked wrong, distorted. Like the real me wasn't real anymore. By the third day, I physically couldn't stop filming. My hand was cramping from holding the phone for hours, but every time I tried to put it down, I'd see the viewer count dropping, and panic would hit me like a wave. The comments weren't just text anymore either. I could hear them. Actual voices in the forest, telling me to go deeper, climb higher, take more risks. When negative comments came in, calling me names or saying I was pathetic, those voices got louder and meaner. The followers started tracking my exact GPS location somehow, even though I had all my privacy settings on. They'd comment things like, "Turn left at the dead tree," or "There's a cliff 200 feet ahead." It should have been impossible for them to know where I was, but they were always right. I started to realize they weren't just watching me, they were guiding me somewhere. I tried to take a bathroom break without filming, but my phone wouldn't let me turn off the camera. The recording just kept going, and comments kept flooding in about how even my most private moments needed to be content. I wasn't Emma Rodriguez anymore. I was just broke girl Lemma, a character performing for an audience that was getting hungrier every hour. On the fourth night, I found carved into the bark of a tree one of the cruelest comments I'd ever received. "Kill yourself for content, you worthless whore." It was burned deep into the wood, like it had been there for years. But I knew it had just appeared in my live stream 2 hours earlier. As I stared at it, more carvings appeared on other trees. Every hate comment, every demand for more extreme content, etched into the forest around me. The algorithm wasn't just suggesting what I should post anymore, it was controlling what I did. My body would start moving without my permission, walking toward dangerous ledges or abandoned mine shafts while my phone kept recording. I'd try to stop, to turn around, but 250,000 people were watching, and their comments had become commands I couldn't disobey. By the fifth day, I realized what was happening. I wasn't creating content anymore, I was being consumed by it. Every like, every comment, every view was feeding something that wasn't human. The followers weren't just people anymore, either. They were usernames without faces, voices without bodies, all of them demanding the same thing. My death, filmed in 4K, monetized, and viral. The comments started getting specific about how I should die. Jump off Thunder Rock for ultimate content. Drink the water from Devil's Pool. Film your last breath. And the horrible thing was, part of me wanted to do it. Not because I wanted to die, but because I wanted to give them what they wanted. I wanted to be a good content creator. I wanted to trend. I was standing at the edge of a cliff on my 6th day. Phone in my hand, 400,000 people watching the live stream. I'd gained followers as the content got more dangerous when I finally understood. They weren't watching Emma Rodriguez. They hadn't been for months. They were watching a digital ghost wearing my face, and they wanted to watch that ghost finally disappear so they could move on to the next creator, the next sacrifice to the algorithm. That's when the real Emma, the girl who just wanted to save money for college, finally fought back. I smashed my phone against the rocks. The screen shattered, the live stream died, and suddenly the forest was quiet. Actually quiet. No voices, no comments, no demands for content. Just me in the mountains and the sound of wind through the trees. I destroyed my backup camera, deleted every app I could remember the passwords for, and threw all the equipment into a ravine. The walk back to civilization was the longest 5 hours of my life. Not because it was far, but because I kept expecting the voices to come back. But they didn't. When I finally got cell service and checked my phone, a basic flip phone I bought at a gas station, I had no social media presence at all. Broke Girl Emma was gone. 250,000 followers, gone. Years of content, gone. And honestly, it was the most relief I'd ever felt. I'm back to working at Kroger now, saving money the slow way. I started classes at the community college this spring, studying to be a librarian. Real books, real conversations, real life. My mom says I seem different, calmer, more present. She doesn't know what happened up there, and I don't think I'll ever tell her. How do you explain that you almost died for content? That you were willing to sacrifice your actual life for digital validation from strangers? Sometimes I see kids at work making TikToks in the parking lot, and I want to warn them. But what would I say? That the algorithm is hungry? That followers aren't really people? That going viral can literally kill you? They'd think I was crazy. Maybe I am. All I know is that I choose real life now, every single day. It's smaller, quieter, and sometimes boring, but it's mine. And that's enough. I'm 31 years old. My name's Maria Santos, and I drive for Uber in Richmond, Virginia. October 2019, my second car got repossessed, and I went hiking in Shenandoah National Park to clear my head because it was free and I needed to be anywhere but stuck in my apartment, thinking about how badly I'd screwed up my life. I don't talk about what happened on that hike much. Honestly, when I do tell people, they look at me like I'm making it up or having some kind of breakdown. Maybe I am, but I know what I saw under that mountain, and I know why I'll never set foot on a trail again. The repo happened on a Tuesday. I'd been using my backup car for Uber runs, this beat-up Honda Civic with 200,000 miles on it, because my reliable vehicle got towed right out of my apartment complex while I was sleeping. I was barely making rent, as it was. Lost a lot of rides that week because the Civic smelled like old fast food, and the AC didn't work. By that Friday, I just needed to get out, do something that didn't cost money I didn't have. Hiking was free except for gas, and I'd heard Old Rag Mountain was popular, well-traveled, the kind of place where you'd see families with kids. Figured it'd be safe enough for a solo hike, and I needed the exercise anyway after spending 12-hour shifts sitting in my car. I left at 5 a.m. that Saturday to beat the crowds. Needed to be back by evening for the weekend. Uber rush, that's when you make actual money. My gear was pretty pathetic, looking back now. Dollar store, water bottles, some granola bars, an old backpack my ex left behind. I didn't have proper hiking boots, just my work sneakers. But the weather was perfect. That crisp October morning where the air smells like wood smoke and dying leaves. And for the first couple hours, I actually felt good. The rock scramble was challenging but manageable, and by noon I'd made it to the summit. The views were incredible. You could see the whole valley spread out below, all those mountains rolling. Away into the distance, leaves blazing orange and red. I sat up there eating my sad granola bar and thinking maybe things weren't completely ruined, you know? Like maybe I could pull myself out of this hole I'd dug. I started down around 1 p.m. Plenty of daylight left. The descent trail was rockier than the way up. Lots of big boulders and stone formations you had to navigate around. That's when I first felt it. This vibration through the rocks under my feet, like when a big truck drives past and you can feel it through the ground. Except there were no trucks. No roads anywhere near this part of the mountain. I stopped, pressed my hand against one of the boulders, and I swear I could feel something moving underneath. A low rumble, almost too deep to hear, but I could feel it in my chest. Then I heard the scratching. It was coming from below the trail, like something was digging or tunneling through rock. Long, slow scraping sounds, claws on stone. I told myself it was probably just settling rocks, geological stuff I didn't understand. Mountains do that, right? They shift and settle. Except the sound moved. It started behind me, then gradually shifted to my left, staying parallel to the trail like it was following me. The scratching would stop for a few minutes, then start up again, always in a slightly different location, but always tracking my direction. I picked up my pace. The trail got steeper here, winding down between massive rock formations. That's when I noticed one of the boulders had shifted. I'd passed this same spot on the way up that morning, and I remembered this particular rock because it looked like a giant tooth sticking out of the ground. Now it was tilted at a weird angle, and there were fresh cracks in the stone around its base, like something had pushed it from underneath. The scratching got louder, more frantic. I could hear it clearly now, this rapid scrabbling sound echoing up from somewhere deep below the trail. Then I heard breathing, heavy, wheezing breaths that sounded too big to be human, echoing up from what had to be caves or tunnels running through the mountain. I didn't know Shenandoah had cave systems in this area. I'd never heard about any caves on Old Rag. I started jogging. My cheap sneakers weren't meant for this kind of terrain, and I almost turned my ankle twice on loose rocks. The scratching sounds were coming from multiple directions now, like whatever was down there had called in backup. I passed a section of trail where the rock surface had cracked open, creating these narrow gaps that led down into darkness. Fresh excavations, dirt and broken stones scattered around them like something had just burst through from below. That's when I saw the claw marks. Deep gouges in solid granite, 3 parallel lines each about 6 inches long, carved into the rock from underneath. Whatever made those marks had to be incredibly strong. Strong enough to tear through stone, and they were recent. I could see fresh stone dust in the grooves, bright and pale against the weathered gray rock. I wasn't jogging anymore. I was running. The ground collapsed 10 feet behind me with a sound like thunder. Just dropped away. leaving a jagged hole in the trail about 4 feet across. I spun around, and for maybe 2 seconds, I saw something pale and massive moving in that darkness. Too quick to get details, but I saw the size of it. Way bigger than a person. Then it was gone, dropping back down into whatever tunnel system it had come from. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get my phone out. No signal. Of course, no signal. I was in the middle of the mountains. But I pulled up my downloaded trail map, trying to figure out the fastest way back to the parking lot. 3 miles. I had 3 miles of this trail left, and something was hunting me from underneath. I kept moving, trying to stay quiet now, trying not to draw attention, but every 50 feet or so I'd pass another hole. Some were small, just narrow gaps in the rock. Others were bigger, large enough for a person to fall through. All of them were fresh. Whatever was down there had been very busy, very recently. And I started noticing a pattern. The holes were concentrated around the trail, specifically at spots where hikers would naturally slow down or stop. At overlooks. At difficult rock scrambles. Places where people would be distracted or off balance. That's when I found the water bottle. Just sitting there on a rock, a bright blue Nalgene bottle that definitely wasn't there when I'd passed this spot that morning. I picked it up. There was a name written on it in Sharpie. Emma K. The water inside was still cold. Someone had been carrying this recently. But there was no one else on the trail now. I'd passed a few people on the way up, but on the way down it had been deserted for over an hour. The smell hit me then. This thick, musky odor like wet dog mixed with dirt and something rotten. It was coming from the holes, wafting up from underground. And underneath that smell, something metallic, like old blood. I dropped the water bottle and ran. The creature came up right in front of me. 1 second the trail was clear. The next there was this massive hole opening up 20 feet ahead, rocks and dirt fountaining into the air. With it came this fine white mist that hung in the sunlight like bone dust, smelling like crushed limestone and spoiled meat. Then it emerged. 8 feet tall, covered in skin so pale and translucent I could see everything underneath. Not just muscles, but the dark shapes of organs, the branching lines of blood vessels, all of it moving and pulsing beneath the surface, like watching something through wax paper. Its limbs were grotesquely long, and when it moved, its joints bent backward with this wet clicking sound like someone cracking knuckles underwater, over and over. The claws were a foot long at least, black and curved, with exposed bone visible at the tips where the keratin had worn away from digging through solid rock. But what made my knees almost give out were the breathing holes. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, covering its torso, neck, and face, small circular openings that expanded and contracted, all of them out of sync, creating this horrible rhythm. When it exhaled, they whistled. When it inhaled, they made sucking sounds. A choir of wet mouths all breathing at once. Its face had no eyes, just smooth, translucent skin stretched over a skull I could see through it, those empty eye sockets visible like dark caves in bone. And its mouth, God, its mouth split its face almost ear to ear, full of flat gray teeth like millstones. Teeth made for grinding, not tearing, for crushing bones into powder. Every breathing hole on its head opened wide, tasting the air, tasting me. Then it lunged. I threw myself sideways, crashed into the underbrush off the trail. The creature was impossibly fast for something that size. It covered the distance in 3 bounds, those backward-bending legs propelling it like a nightmare grasshopper. I scrambled backward, grabbing rocks, throwing anything I could reach. 1 stone hit it in the chest, and it made this sound not a roar, but a scream through 100 holes at once, creating harmonics that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Then it dove, just dropped straight down into the ground like water down a drain. For maybe 5 seconds there was silence. Then I heard the scratching again, but faster now, purposeful. Moving underground, circling. I ran back toward the trail, but it emerged ahead of me, cutting off my path. Another burst from underground behind me. They were coordinating, herding me. I could hear other calls now. That whistling scream echoing from multiple directions. There were more of them down there. A lot more. I crashed through the forest off-trail, branches whipping my face, thorns tearing my clothes and skin. Behind me, I could hear it following, sometimes above ground, with that horrible clicking joint sound. sometimes diving back down and traveling through its tunnels faster than I could run on the surface. Every time I thought I'd lost it, it would burst up 50 feet ahead, blocking my escape route, forcing me to change direction. The sun was getting lower. Maybe an hour of good daylight left. I was completely lost now, the trail gone, my downloaded map useless. All I could do was head downhill and pray. That's when I broke into a small clearing and saw them. 3 of the creatures, 2 large ones and something smaller, a juvenile, maybe 6 feet tall, with holes still developing across its pale body. They were gathered around what looked like an old sinkhole, and I could see things down in that darkness. Clothing, a backpack, bones. All 3 turned toward me at once, hundreds of breathing holes opening in unison. The sound was like wind through a cave system. The juvenile made a chittering noise through its holes, almost curious. The 2 adults moved to flank me, coordinating without sound, just slight movements of their heads. I was dead. I knew it. These things had evolved to hunt in packs, had learned human patterns, had been doing this for God knows how many generations. I was just another hiker who'd wandered into their territory during October, when the crowds came and the hunting was easy. But then I saw it. Behind the juvenile, maybe 30 feet past the sinkhole, an old oak tree, massive and ancient, with what looked like a hunter's stand built into it. The kind of thing the old-timers build for deer season and then forget about. If I could get up there, if the structure would hold, I didn't think. I just moved. I ran straight at the juvenile, screaming like a lunatic, waving my arms. It reared back, startled these things, hunted through ambush and coordination, not through direct confrontation with prey that fought back. I dove past it, felt claws rake across my backpack, heard the fabric tear. I hit the oak tree at full speed, grabbed the bottom rung of the ladder, half-rotted wood that nearly broke under my grip, and pulled myself up. My sneakers slipped on the moss-covered rungs. Below me, I heard all 3 creatures converging, their breathing holes creating this terrible symphony. The platform was maybe 15 feet up. I hauled myself onto it just as claws scraped the wood below me. The whole structure shuddered. One of the adults was climbing, those long fingers finding purchase in the bark, pulling itself up with grotesque ease. I grabbed a broken branch from the platform, thick as my forearm, and swung it down hard, connected with the thing's head. The branch shattered, and so did several of its breathing holes. They collapsed inward with wet, popping sounds, black fluid leaking out. The creature fell backward with a scream that made my ears ring, hit the ground, and immediately burrowed down, disappearing into the earth. The other 2 circled below, their breathing holes all opening wide, that whistling scream building. Then one of them started digging, not down, but up, undermining the tree. I could hear it below me. Feel the vibrations through the oak's roots. The sun was touching the horizon now, October light going golden and long. I looked at the sinkhole, at what was probably their nest, at the bones down there. I looked at my phone, still no signal, but I had 40% battery. I turned on the flashlight, set it to strobe, and threw it as hard as I could toward the sinkhole. The phone landed right at the edge, flashlight stuttering on and off, on and off. For a moment, nothing. Then both creatures stopped. Their breathing holes all turned toward the light, opening and closing in response to the flashing. They moved toward it slowly, cautiously. Light, they were attracted to light, or maybe confused by it. Underground creatures, evolved in total darkness, and here was something bright and flashing right at the entrance to their nest. I didn't wait to see more. I climbed down the opposite side of the tree as quietly as I could, dropped the last 6 feet, and ran. I could hear them behind me, that scream building again, but I had maybe a 30-second head start. I found a creek and followed it downhill, my feet pounding through the water to mask my trail. The scratching sounds faded. The sun was almost gone, but there was still enough light to see. The creek led to a wider stream, and the stream led to a logging road. Gravel and tire ruts, and beautiful, human-made reality. I followed it for what felt like hours but was probably 30 minutes, my legs burning, my torn clothes sticking to the cuts on my arms and back. Finally, I saw the parking lot through the trees, my Honda Civic sitting alone under the darkening sky. I've never been so happy to see that piece of shit car in my life. I sat inside with the doors locked for 20 minutes, shaking, watching the tree line. Nothing emerged. As the last light faded, I turned the key, and the engine actually started on the first try for once. I drove home doing 90 the whole way, white-knuckling the steering wheel, checking my mirrors every few seconds. I reported it, called the Park Service that night, told them everything. The ranger I talked to was polite, but clearly thought I was delusional. He said there were no cave systems on Old Rag Mountain. Said what I probably heard was groundhogs or foxes, and the pale thing I saw was likely just a deer in bad lighting. He took my information and said they'd look into it, but his voice said he wouldn't. I checked the news obsessively after that. Found one article about a hiker named Emma Keller who'd gone missing on Old Rag in early October, 3 weeks before my hike. They never found her. Search was called off after 2 weeks. Her family said she was an experienced hiker who knew the area well. I think about that water bottle sometimes, about how cold it still was. I got a different job after that, something that keeps me in the city where there's concrete under my feet. Some of my friends think I'm being paranoid, but they didn't see what I saw. They didn't hear those things calling to each other underground, coordinating their hunt like wolves. October comes around now, and I stay inside. Won't even look at pictures of fall foliage, because I know what's under those mountains, waiting in the tunnels they've carved through solid stone. Patient things that have learned human hiking patterns, that know when we're most vulnerable, that hunt in packs. I still have the clothes I was wearing that day, stuffed in a box in my closet. I should have thrown them away, but I kept them. The tears from thorns and branches are normal. The 4 long gouges through the backpack fabric, parallel lines exactly 6 inches apart. Those aren't normal. Neither are the 3 claw marks across my lower back raised scars now that ache when it rains. The ER doctor asked what happened. I said I fell into some jagged rocks. He looked at the wounds for a long time before accepting that answer. If you're planning a hike in Shenandoah this fall, especially Old Rag Mountain, I need you to listen to me. If you feel vibrations through the rocks, if you hear scratching from below the trail, if you find a hole that wasn't there that morning, turn around. Get back to your car and leave. Don't be curious. Don't investigate. Don't convince yourself it's just settling rocks or wildlife. Just run. Because the Park Service won't believe you, and by the time they do, it'll be too late. Those things are still there, still hunting, still learning our patterns. And every October when the hikers come in crowds, they're waiting. I know because I see the missing person reports. They come every fall now, like clockwork. 1 or 2 hikers who vanish on popular trails, experienced people who know the mountains. The searches always end the same way. No body found, no explanation. Just another name added to the list of people who walked into the Appalachian wilderness and never walked out. Emma Keller wasn't the first. She won't be the last. And I have to live with that knowledge, knowing what's under those mountains, knowing no one will believe me until they see it themselves. By then, it's too late to run.